Landon Cassill is likely to go to a Kaulig Xfinity Series car in 2022. Stewart-Haas Racing has a major announcement in Indianapolis Motor Speedway on Friday, and Spire Motorsports is likely to acquire Ware Racing's charter, their second charter for the 2022 season. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off with some paint scheme news. The first paint scheme we're going to take a look at is Martin Truex Jr.'s 2022 Bass Pro Shop scheme that we are going to see next season. The number of races were not revealed on how much we're going to see this car, but we'll see this car, I believe, at the Clash and also, I believe, at the Daytona 500 as well. When it comes to the number placement on the cars, I think that this has been one of the better ones that have been revealed so far. I think did a really good job. I also think that the sponsors did a really good job on it as well, using as much viable space you can use. I think did a really good job. I wish that the numbers would push back a little bit more, but I do think that this paint scheme looks really good considering the number placement. The next paint schemes we're going to take a look at are Brad Keselowski and Chris Buescher's 2022 Fastenal schemes that we're for sure going to see in the clashes at the Coliseum, and we'll also see in multiple other races next year as well. I will say one thing about this paint scheme. I think that this paint scheme overall is pretty decent. It's not absolutely amazing. I do like the matte chrome finishes on it. I do think, and one thing I will say is I'm not a big fan, though, that they're not using the full sponsor on the car, not all the way across. I think that they could use more now. RFK did tweet that they were not really able to do that, and I do think over time that they're going to do a much better job, and I think overall most sponsoring teams are going to do a pretty good job. I wish that they would have used more of the viable space that they were going to be given, but it is what it is, and actually for the paint schemes, I think they look pretty decent, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to look at the last paint scheme. We're going to be taking a look at Dale Jr.'s 2022 helmet scheme that we're going to see at Martinsville. I like this a lot. This is a scheme that I think was absolutely the favorite going into it. I really think did a good job on the look of it. And this was a dispute pants. Got to take a look at the paint scheme. And overall, this is definitely my favorite one that I got to see for sure. And I'm glad that this is one that was going to be chosen. Very crazy and interesting. The 03, there actually was potential that the 03 was actually going to be used for the helmets, and it looked a lot different. So I'm really glad that they decided to go with the 88. There had been talk that maybe we're going to use the 03, and Dale Jr. said that in his Instagram Live that they were talking about using the 03, but they decided to go with the 88 instead. Now, we know that the 88 car is going to run at Martinsville, and we also know that they're going to see this car for 3 other races with Miguel Pluto on 3 road courses throughout next year at Indianapolis Road Course, Road America, and the other in COTA, which will see him in 3 races next year with Brett. So we might see some other Cup guys run, maybe like Kyle Larson comes through Brad's, but I think that this paint scheme looks really good, and I'm really excited to see this one out on the racetrack here at Martinsville. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Daytona Road Course. As the Daytona Road Course has added sausage curbs on the backstretch. For those who don't know, sausage curbs are really large curves, and what this is supposed to do is prevent cars from potentially getting out into the grass. Now, this is an IMSA decision. This is a decision for the IMSA race, so a lot of people are saying, oh, NASCAR overall made the decision to do this. This was an IMSA decision. They were trying to prevent cars from going into the grass. I'm not overall a big fan of sausage curbs in general and track limits and stuff at points, but at the same time, I completely understand why they did this. I think this is the right decision, but at the same time, I'm not overall the biggest fan of it. But you do want to prevent cars from getting out into the grass and damaging their cars. So it's the right decision, in my opinion, and it is what it is. But I do wish that they made a better decision overall on that, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Amanda Oliver, as she has been NASCAR promoted Deputy General Counsel, Amanda Oliver, to Senior Vice President and General Counsel, and she'll now lead the company's legal operations. This is a really big move. She's replacing someone, I don't remember her name that she is replacing, but she'll be taking into that stop. I don't know much about Amanda Oliver, what her co-owners and people in the sport think about her, but I think that hopefully this will be a positive move and direction for the sport with her coming in there. That's what I'm hoping is she can come in there and work on some of the issues inside the sport. But I think hopefully it will end up being overall really good move for her, and she will be promoted. So good decision. I mean, I don't know how it's going to end up going, but I think in ways it is a good move, and hopefully she'll do overall a really good job in regards to that. I think it'll be good if she ends up doing a great job, though. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the WRL at COTA, as the winners of the WRL at COTA were Kaz Gralla, Austin Dillon, and Tyler Reddick, which they actually won the WRL COTA races on Saturday and Sunday. They won the main features, they qualified up front, and they were able to win both of the feature races at Circuit of the Americas. Really, really awesome to see that they were able to win that event. I believe that they also competed in last year's event, and I believe they actually ended up finishing second or almost winning the race last year. 3 drivers that I think have become really, really impressive, and Tyler already posted on his Twitter that he said, first road course wins, but I think it's really, really awesome to see that you get to see some NASCAR representation go out there and win these events. I think it's really, really awesome to see that, and I'm happy that they were able to go out there and win these events. And I hope that what this will do is to help Austin Hill and Tyler Reddick be much better on road courses and help RCR's program on road courses. They also had Kaz Grall there, which I think was a really, really good move to bring him out there to be a good pointer for them, because he's also, I think, a really, really solid, excellent road course racer. So really cool to see this for sure, that they were able to win the WR Dakota, and I think it was a great thing to hear. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about the Snowflake 100, and then we'll jump into the Snowball Derby. So, this past weekend, you had the Snowball Derby this weekend, and you also had the Snowflake 100. The Snowflake 100 was just a straightforward domination by Derek Thorne, who basically led every single lap. There, though, were quite a few wrecks that happened in this race, including a situation between Johanna Long and Noah Gragson. Noah Gragson on a late restart with around 18 laps to go. He tried to basically send it 3 wide on the restart on the bottom of the track at 5 Flag Speedway. You really can't do that. Noah Gragson has actually won the Snowball Derby before, and he was actually trying to qualify in his Ferretta Jones. He's racing for Ferretta Jones Racing, a team that has competed in ARCA in the past, and he tried to send it 3 wide on Johanna Long Robbins, and unfortunately what ended up happening was when he tried to send it basically 3 wide, he came back up on the track and unfortunately collected Johanna Long. Johanna Long was not very happy with the situation of what had ended up happening, as she went on her Twitter basically, how is this guy employed, and how does this guy have a ride? And then she basically later said that it was very unprofessional what he did and the way he races, and what she basically wants for him was to pay for the car. Noah Gragson did say that he felt bad for the situation, that he basically probably was a little bit not the smartest thing to make the move. In my opinion, I understand Johanna Long being upset, and I saw a lot of people saying, she hasn't been relevant for 10 years. That really shouldn't even really matter at the beginning, be honest with you, because I don't care how long you're racing, you don't send it 3 wide at 5 Flag Speedway. I believe that he was 100% in the wrong in the situation, and he should not have sent it 3 wide in that situation. I get trying to make a move, but you've got 18 laps to go. I can understand maybe on the last lap of the race or the final restart of the race making that move. But at the same time, to be perfectly honest with you, I think the move was a little bit egregious and a little bit too early to make that move. So, in my honest opinion, if you want the truth, I do think 100% that Noah Gragson did make a little bit of a bold move, and it was kind of a ballsy move to make in the Snowflake 100. And now we're going to jump on to the next story and talk about the Snowball Derby that happened on Sunday. The Snowball Derby was really, really a race that was dominated by Derek Thorne. Derek Thorne, who was trying to basically do the sweep of winning the Snowflake 100 and also winning the Snowball Derby. Derek Thorne basically led almost 200, I think he led the first 290 laps of the race, but on the restart, around 12 or 13 laps to go, Chandler Smith, who basically been his biggest competition of the race, he got into the back of Derek Thorne. Now, basically, he ran into the back of him, gave him the bumper run, and shot him up into the racetrack, and Chandler Smith was able to go out there and pick up I believe his first or second Snowball Derby victory. There was a lot of NASCAR representation there. But I will say this, I think with Chandler Smith, he did give him a really, really big bump and run. You can say that's dirty in racing and all, but it is short track racing, and aero games are definitely a big part of the race this past weekend at the track. A lot of drivers were talking about that they're having a lot of aero issues and a lot of aero games being played, and there was a lot of aero affecting it. It felt like when guys racing the truck series for about a year or two now, he understands the aero situation, and he made the bump and run. It was a little bit dirty, but at the same time, bump and run is something that I think is absolutely accepted in short track racing. Derek Thorne was not really overall happy about the situation. He wasn't very happy, and the fans were kind of booing Chandler Smith for the move, but at the same time, I have no problem with the bump and run being used, especially late in the race. I think it would have been a little bit early in the race. I would have thought it would have been a little bit egregious, but I was really his only opportunity to pass on the restart, and he was able to do that and go out and win the Snowball Derby. So that was great to see. There was a lot of NASCAR representation there. You had Grant Enfinger, who finished 19th. You had Ryan Priest in the event, who finished 4th. Eric Jones, who finished 10th in the race. And you had a lot of other drivers from other respective series coming over and racing. But Chandler Smith picking up the win, a driver that I think has really, really got a lot of potential. And it's really cool to see that he won the Snowball Derby this year. Huge congratulations to him on picking up the win, and really glad to see that he was able to pick up the victory in that event. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the winner of the Gateway Dirt Nationals, the 2021. So the Gateway Dirt Nationals, I don't remember if they had the race last year. I think they may have, but I don't entirely remember if they had the race last year. but they may return this year. They're also going to be back next year in 2022. You had so Nice Motorsports past weekend had a big contest, and whoever won this race, the main super late model event, they would go on and win a ride with Nice Motorsports. Well, the guy who won the super late model event and will be driving a Nice Motorsports truck, most likely in Knoxville, depending on if NASCAR will approve this guy or not, the driver is going to be Tyler Carpenter. Now, Tyler Carpenter has gotten a lot of notoriety because of the way he's acted in his interviews. Tyler Carpenter is a guy that really does not care. He'll say what he wants. He was saying some really, really crazy stuff during his post-race interview after the race concluded, Stacey calling out the crowd and stuff and calling out basically people calling them keyboard warriors and stuff. I thought that was really, really funny, calling them a bunch of pussies and all that stuff. I thought he was really, really funny in that situation, but not. And at the end of the second interview, he seemed a little bit less like crazy as he did, but at the same time, he's a guy that I think is a driver that comes from that little like short track background, a guy that's really wanting to get that opportunity. I think he was putting on a really, really big show to amp the crowd up. Now, like I said, NASCAR is going to have a pretty much, if I am a NASCAR, I am 100% trying to prove Tyler Carpenter and trying to make sure that he can make it to the event. But I'm really excited to see that Nice is doing this contest, and they'll have 5 trucks next year in this event, because we'll talk about the driver that is going to drive for their truck full-time, their 4th full-time driver for 2022. But I'm really happy to see that Tyler Carpenter is getting an opportunity to race next year, especially at Knoxville. Maybe we'll see 5 Nice Motorsports trucks throughout the year, but I'm really overall happy to see that Tyler Carpenter was able to win the Gateway Dirt Nationals here in 2021. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Chase Elliott and the Nitro Rallycross. Chase Elliott, this past weekend, he competed in his first ever event in the Nitro Rallycross, the season finale for the Nitro Rallycross. Travis Sonda was the champion of the inaugural season for the Nitro Rallycross, but I think the driver that really stood out in the event was Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott was in his qualifier on Saturday to try to make it to the finals for that, and he had some contact with Tanner Faust. He basically got into Tanner Faust really, really hard. Tanner got a little bit wide, and Chase basically came into it. And Chase Elliott in the last lap, he's able to actually pass him. I mean, he had a lot of drivers and people, and a lot of fans were there. We're really, really excited. Unfortunately for Chase Elliott, he got disqualified for the contact and was not able to race on at the feature. But Chase Elliott had a left gut, basically did not really feel angry about the penalty. He basically took it with stride, took it good, and he really wasn't mad about that. In my opinion, that situation, I look back at the replay, wish that there would be a little more contact let out. According to the rule, though, you can't really have that much contact in that event, so I 100% understand why they gave him a penalty. I just wish they would allow a little more contact. From what I heard, these cars potentially could be fragile. It's potentially one of the reasons why they basically disqualified Chase Elliott in that event. But on Sunday, Chase actually was able to make it to the finals, finish second in his heat, and was actually able to make it to the finals on Sunday, and then unfortunately, of course, finished last, which Kyle Busch did end up doing better, where he finished 5th. But the fact that Chase Elliott was even able to make it to finals in his first time there was really, really impressive to see, and I think a lot of drivers, including Travis Sonda, were extremely impressed what Chase Elliott did right there, and I think it was really cool to see that Chase Elliott was able to make it to the finals in that event. So I think that's really, really awesome, really, really cool, and it was great to see that Chase Elliott was able to go out there and compete in the season finale for Nitro Rallycross. Also, Haley Deegan was in the shorter class, I think one of the off-road classes as well, and she competed in the finals. I think she ended up finishing in the final 8 as well, which was really, really cool to see for her too. But I think it was really, really awesome. I'm glad to see that Chase Elliott was able to go out there and compete in that specific event. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Larson, as there was a story that was printed out a couple days ago about Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson says that he went to Disneyland during the Thanksgiving weekend, and he said very few people congratulated him and recognized him. He said that he thought he was going to have more people that were going to recognize him after winning his first ever NASCAR Cup Series championship after an insane 10-win season, but very few people at Disneyland basically came up to congratulate him. And I think that one thing to think about in this situation is NASCAR is not as popular as it used to be. NASCAR still has a lot of people that does watch, and no doubt we've seen at points an increase in the TV ratings this year, no doubt about that. But one thing that I think that's really, really important to understand and note is NASCAR doesn't have the same footing ground that it had 10 years ago. You don't see as many drivers being recognized in the sport. If you go ask a lot of older fans nowadays, they don't mention a lot of the newer class. Of course, some mention Chase Elliott, some mention Kyle Busch, but you don't have a lot of drivers that are relevant. Now, Kyle Larson could be a driver that really could take NASCAR to the next level, or a lot of people know who Bubba Wallace is, but Kyle Larson is definitely really interested in him going to Disneyland and people not really knowing him besides a couple people. He thought he would gotten some VIP treatment. Some people apparently in the crowd, he said, basically thought, he should be 100% getting VIP treatment. But I think it's overall extremely interesting that Kyle Larson really wasn't recognized before. You'd think that Kyle Larson, the guy who won the NASCAR Cup Series Championship, will get a little bit more recognition than he did. But overall, it is what it is, and I think it's a crazy story that he was not recognized a lot more than he was. I think it's absolutely crazy, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about McDonald's in 2311 Racing. As was revealed today on Tuesday, that 2311 Racing has announced McDonald's will sponsor Bubba Wallace at the Daytona 500 and more increased presence on the 23 car for next year. It was not revealed how many races they will sponsor Bubba Wallace, but they will sponsor him at the Daytona 500 next year. DoorDash should sponsor him for 2021 and 2022. They will sponsor Bubba Wallace. On top of that, they're also going to sponsor Kurt Busch for multiple races in 2022. There was no number disclosed on how many races that they was going to sponsor him for 2022. Really cool to see that McDonald's is increasing their presence for the 2022 season. I think if you look at 2311 Racing, I think the future of this team, especially going into next year, I think that they have a lot of potential to be a team many, many years down the road. We've seen how much praise Denny Hamlin has given Kurt Busch over the last couple years and how much he really, really likes Kurt Busch. And you look at 2311 Racing, I think that they're a team that has a really, really bright future ahead of them. And the fact that McDonald's is increasing their presence is really, really awesome. I assume they're probably going to sponsor potentially up to 10 races next year. I think they're going to sponsor for a lot next year. But I think it is really overall really, really awesome that 2311 Racing is going to be sponsored by McDonald's going into next year. And despite that, they're also going to be sponsoring Kurt Busch next year, which I don't think they sponsor Kurt Busch at and I think they didn't sponsor Kurt Busch in the last couple years at Chip Ganassi Racing. So it's really cool to see that McDonald's is increasing their partnership and their branding going into next year. I think overall is really, really cool, and I'm happy overall to see that McDonald's will be sponsoring them for a couple more races and many, many races in 2022. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jason Jarrett. As Jason Jarrett is going to be spotting for Kurt Busch at 2311 in the Cup Series, Josh Berry Jr. Motorsports in Xfinity, and Tay Fogelman at On Points Motorsports in the Truck Series in 2022. Jason Jarrett has been a spotter in NASCAR for a very, very long time, a driver that was a former driver who drove for his dad organization when he had an organization in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and is a guy who has raced in ARCA as well as contended for victories in that, but a guy that is also spotted. Now, I'm not sure how good of a spotter Jason Jarrett is. I'm not sure how he's going to do, but I do think that with him going over to a new team, what I hope for Jason Jarrett going into next season is he can have some chemistry with Kurt Busch going into next year, but I think that they work together very, very well. I do think that Kurt Busch has a lot of potential to do great with him going into next year. As for Josh Berry Jr. Motorsports, it's definitely interesting that he's going to be spotting not for just only Toyotas, but he's also going to be spotting for Chevy as well. What we've seen in the past, Eddie DeHaan spotted for Austin Hill last year, but spotted also for Junior Motorsports and Hendrick Motorsports as well last year as well. So really cool to see. This is my opinion. I think Josh Berry will do very well next year. And I hope the same for Tate Fogelman going into next year. I think it's really, really cool to see that we're going to see Jason Jarrett get that opportunity to spot in the Cup Series at a driver that I think will surprise a lot of people going into next year. I'm overall very, very happy to see that he's going to be spotted for the next year. And I think this is overall a very, very good move in my opinion. I'm really excited about this for sure. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about some NASCAR suspensions that were revealed this past Friday. Johnny Rotten has been suspended indefinitely for substance abuse policy, and John Burr Jr. and Austin Civic have been suspended for some stuff that I'm really not going to get into, basically child endangerment or something like that. That's all I'm really going to say on that. As regards to the suspension on the substance abuse policy for Johnny Rotten, we really don't know what substance he was taking. It wasn't really revealed, but you got to follow the rules and stuff. Unlike Cesar Baccarello, unfortunately, we kind of know what was wrong with Cesar Baccarello and why he got, unfortunately, in suspension. It was something in his medication and NASCAR was not allowing, but I would not be shocked if it's something very, very serious. He has been a crew chief for MBM Motorsports for a in the Cup Series this year when that 13 car ran in select races in 2022. So, hope we gets better. Hope he gets the help he needs, and I hope that he will hopefully be back soon, but he's going to have to go through the road to recovery program. I would expect that Johnny Rotten will probably try to go through the road recovery program, and maybe he'll be back before the beginning of the year, but honestly, I'm not expecting him to be back before the beginning of the year. He'll have to go through some drug testing policies and the road recovery program to get through. As for the other two, what they did was absolutely disgusting. Both of them apparently have been in prison in North Carolina. What they did was absolutely disgusting, and they, in my opinion, should both be in prison for basically the rest of their lives for what they did and should never be able to walk away from jail. 100% they need to be in jail for that, and what they did was absolutely ridiculous. It's criminal, and no one should be able to be accepted in society the way they were. So that's my opinion on the situation of Johnny Rotten, Johnny Bird, and Austin Zivich. I think right there, I think it's really important that you don't do this kind of stuff. Don't do this stuff and don't get caught, because if you do this stuff, you're going to get caught and you're going to get sent to prison for a very, very long time. So that's some big penalties that got revealed. It was really, really crazy and really, really gross stuff that got revealed. They need to get the help, but they also need to be put in prison for a very, very long time, in my honest and sincere opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the SRX. It was reported by Adam Stern on Friday that the SRX will not be at North Wilkesboro in 2022, but Ray Abraham says that doesn't mean that we're not going to have any super historic NASCAR short tracks next year. We've got a really cool announcement coming. Stay tuned. He also says that about 30 drivers have talked to the SRX about potentially racing in 2022. We talked on this channel, I think, earlier this week, last week on the channel, about that there have been talk about the SRX potentially having a lot more one-off rides going next year, and also about potentially have new short tracks that are coming to the schedule. Last year, I think the SRX had a really, really successful season, and they're wanting to profit in season number 2. For me, I hope that they do expand the fields, which I think that they're going to do that going into next year. My big question going into next year, the SRX, is what tracks are they potentially going to go to next year? Maybe Rockingham Speedway. Rockingham Speedway, they're having remodeling of the track, and they're basically going to repave the track, but they don't need as much money for the track to be successful. The track is almost basically ready, though. Like I said, they do need to repave the track, which is very, very likely that track is going to get repaved very, very soon. So that's what I'm hoping right there, is Rockingham gets another opportunity. One track that I would 100% though like to see get an opportunity, maybe have the SRX hosted, is I-55 Raceway at Peebly. For those of you who know, I'm from the Peebly area, and I-55 Raceway has been a staple in the World of Outlaws area, and it's a track that I think is about, a quarter mile to a third mile length, and I've been there many, many times as a kid. And the atmosphere around the track, especially, they have about 10 to 15,000 seats. But that track, in my opinion, 100% deserves recognition. It's had really, really great racing over the years, and a track that I think deserves a lot more recognition. So if there's a track that I 100% recommend, that'll be one track. Another track I'd like to see if they were going to go out to the West Coast, is Irwindale Speedway. Irwindale Speedway has hosted some incredible short track racing as well, and I hope that's one track that they're considering it as a historic track in the ARCA West Series, or when the K&N Pro was called the K&N Pro West Series. I think that track absolutely deserves it. But they've got other tracks like Hickory Speedway, no doubt that they could absolutely use. Hickory's been a legendary track. Greenville Pickens Speedway is another track that maybe could come out of nowhere and maybe race long term down the road. Who really, really knows? But I think what the SRX is doing too is great. And you look at potential driver lineups that could be here next year. I think what drivers I like to see, Dale Earnhardt Jr. doing a one-off start. I like to see Jeff Gordon come out of retirement and do one-off start going into next year. I think it'd be really, really cool if they were going to be able to have more drivers coming into next season, and that's what I'm really, really hoping going into next year, is we get to see a more expanded SRX lineup next year. I think we need to see about 20 cars in the field next year. I think they're going to have enough money to make 20 cars next year, and maybe we'll hear more about that soon, but we got about 6 months of the season starts for SRX, but I'm overall extremely excited that the SRX has some big announcements coming very, very soon. I think it's really, really awesome, and I'm very excited to see what is going on for this team, for these teams down the road. I think it's really, really awesome, and I'm looking forward to this overall for sure. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Hills Motorsports. As was revealed on Monday, that Hills Motorsports will be expanding to a 2-truck series team in 2022. Tim Hill has been running the organization basically for the last couple of years. He will drive full-time in the 56 truck. It's unclear if he'll be earning points in that 56 truck next year, or if he'll basically be focusing on the Cup Series to try to get points right there. Hill Motorsports will also switch to Toyota and run the TRD Pro in 2022. I think it's the right time for Hill Motorsports to make this move. They have been a team, in my opinion, that has been extremely underrated in the Truck Series, and a team that, in my opinion, does not 100% get the recognition that they absolutely deserve. They have been a team that's been absolutely outstanding in the Truck Series. They've contended for top 10s and top 15s. They've had Tyler Hill, I think, is another driver that doesn't really get recognition as well. He's done really, really good job with the Hill Motorsports team, and they're a team that really does not have a lot of employees. I think they maybe have some of the MBM Motorsports employees that may come over there from time to time. But if they're expanding to a two-truck team going into next year, I do think that it's going to be great for their team. My question is, what is going to happen to the second truck going next year? Because that second truck is going to be full-time, and what's the number going to be? I'm going to guess that potentially the number of that second truck could be maybe the 63 to 66, or could even be the 60. It could be maybe the 55 for all we know, because I think the 55 is available potentially for them to use next year. But I'm really excited to see Hills Motorsports' future. I think that this has been a team that generally has been on the move for a very, very long time, has been showing a lot of progress with Timmy Hill, and I really think going into next season, I think they have potential. So what are my expectations for Hill Motorsports? One, they need to show improvement going into next year, be more consistent, and just be able to go out there and finish races. And if they're able to finish in the top 20 in many races next year, I think the ultimate goal should be trying to finish in the top 20 consistently, because if they're able to do that, I think that'll be really, really impressive. But I'm really excited to see that Hills Motorsports is going to be expanding next year. It's another truck on the field going into next year, and I'm very excited to see Hill Motorsports is going to be expanding in the 2022 NASCAR Truck Series season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chris Wright. As was announced this morning that Chris Wright will drive full-time for Nice Motorsports in 2022, driving the number 44 car full-time. He'll be the fourth full-time driver at the organization. Carson Osbar will be driving the 42 next year. Dean Thompson will drive the 40 full-time for Nice Motorsports, and Wallace Elm will drive the 45 for them full-time in 2022. Chris Wright really did not have a really stellar season in 2021, where he had his 26.3 average finish in the season, but you have to remember he was in Young's Motorsports Trucks, and Young's Motorsports is not a really good organization overall, to be perfectly honest with you. This also opens up Young Motorsports as well, because now two of their drivers will not be back. Tate Fogelman, who we know is going to On Point Motorsports. Now we know Chris Wright is going to go full-time. My expectations for Chris Wright going into next year, they're not overly that high, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not just saying that because I don't think Chris Wright is that good. I'm just saying that Chris Wright is a guy that has a lot of potential to be really, really, really good. But one thing I want to criticize Nice Motorsports a lot for is that I do think that they should not be running four full-time trucks, considering I think that they are a team that really kind of went down in standards this past season. And I think a lot of it was, unfortunately, because they had a lot of truck inventory this past season, where they had 4 trucks in 2021. And I really believe that they probably should have only had, I think, 3 trucks going into next year, maybe like a 4th truck on a part-time basis. And another big thing that gets brought up is what happens to Ryan Truex going into next year, because now he's not going to be at the team going into next year. I think Ryan Truex can have maybe some more organization on a part-time basis. You never know, he can end up at Spire Motorsports' Cup Series program next year, or could end up at another organization going into next year. But to be perfectly honest with you, I really do not know what's going to happen to Ryan Truex's career going into next year. Sponsorship merely matters now, and we're only 60 days basically from the start of the season, and he's out. But like back to Nice Motorsports, I really think that Nice Motorsports is making really, really bad decisions for them long term. They've got a lot of drivers that kind of are not really experienced. I think that Carson Osbar is still going to be their most likely chance to make the playoffs and win races. As for the other 3, Dean Thompson's guy actually had a pretty decent run at Phoenix, but I'm not expecting a lot from him. Also, same thing goes for Loss Allen. Loss Allen had a not-so-stellar performance at Phoenix. He did bounce back from getting spun early in the race at Darlington, but he really did not have overall an amazing performance in that event. So my expectations are not really high for the Nice Motorsports camp next year, and that's the same thing that goes from Chris Wright. I hope he does really well next year, and I hope that he can prove me wrong and do well, but my expectations are overall not through the roof for Chris Wright, but I hope he's able to prove me wrong, and hopefully he will be able to have a really strong run and be able to make it into and do really well and impress me. I think the goal is just to get as much experience as possible and run as well as he can in his second full-time NASCAR Truck Series season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about RPM and Andrew Mertens. Now, we already know at this point that RPM and Andrew Mertens basically have parted ways at this point, and RPM is rebranded to Petty GMS Racing going into next year. Well, it was reported by Adam Stern earlier this evening that both Richard Petty and Andrew Mertens feel content with splitting up. Petty said today during the press conference, we want somebody that wants to win, and some of our partners before had just been investors. Mertens wanted a fresh start too and may invest in a different NASCAR team per sources. Andrew Mertens had basically been around in the organization since around the time the merger happened between Richard Petty Enterprises and all those other Dodge conglomerates that basically ran out of funding. Ray Abraham, Robbie Racing, and all those teams that got involved in a single partnership for 2009. They basically decided to form around 2009 to become Richard Petty Motorsports. And then they started, rumors indicated past week that they were basically going to part ways. We know that GMS Racing paid $19.1 million for the Medallion Financial. That's how much we paid. We know that Richard Petty is going to be a chairman in the Petty GMS Racing Motorsports going into next year. But my big question is, what is going to happen to Andrew Mertens, where he's going to end up if he's going to invest in NASCAR? I think he's going to end up with most likely a Chevy team if he's going to remain, since he's been with the Chevy camp for the last couple years. I think he'll end up, if he's going to end up in NASCAR, Mania NASCAR, he's not going to be part of the Petty GMS team. I think he's going to end up at Richard Childress Racing. Didn't make a lot of sense. Medallion Financial has a lot of funding and a lot of backing, and they could bring a lot of funding over to RCR, and maybe eventually they could expand to a 3-car operation down the road. But I think that he'll end up somewhere next year with Richard Childress Racing. I think Richard Childress Racing is most likely to end up where, if he's going to go and work as an investor for a team going into next year, I think it will end up being Richard Childress Racing and that older branding and stuff, so he can eventually maybe become the driver, not a driver, but the person that helps run the RCR organization long-term down the road going forward, and can bring that vision down the road into life. But that's one thing I think that's really, really interesting. This potentially could happen going in very, very soon, and we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that. But that is a story in regards to that, and maybe we'll see where Andrew Mertens ends up going in the 2022 season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Stewart-Haas Racing, as there is a media outlet coverage thing that came out today, and it says that Stewart-Haas Racing has a major announcement on December 10th at 10:40 a.m. Eastern at 9:40 at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and Chase Briscoe and Tony Stewart are going to be in attendance for that reveal. It will be car unveilings. I saw a lot of people that were thinking that it was going to be the reveal of NASCAR, of Dodge in the NHRA program. That's not going to be the case from what I've heard. That is not going to be the case, because if it was the NHRA reveal of the manufacturer, that will not happen, though there is a show that's coming really, really soon, and there hopefully will be more details, and most likely at that auto show, we're going to know more about Dodge, but that is not going to be the Dodge to NASCAR reveal that I think a lot of people have been waiting on, but that hopefully will come very, very soon. That auto show is supposed to be coming really, really soon, where we get more details in regards to what's going on right there, and we may have more information and details in the manufacturer, what the NASCAR manufacturer that Tony Stewart could go to. What I think this overall is two things. One, I think it's going to be a sponsor reveal for Chase Briscoe going into next year, and a sponsor partnership coming back for next year, or a new sponsor coming in. People have indicated maybe like an AJ Foyt looking throwback, since Tony Stewart had a lot of association with AJ Foyt. Maybe one of AJ Foyt's sponsors could be coming over. The second thing I think it's going to be, though, is Tony Stewart is potentially going to make a one-off return in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at the Indianapolis Road Course. For a lot of you who do not remember, Tony Stewart was actually in 2020. He actually was supposed to make his return to the NASCAR Xfinity Series to do a one-off in a SHR Xfinity Series car and a second SHR prepared Xfinity Series car for the 2020 season when there was a real Indianapolis Road Course. But because of COVID-19 and fans not being allowed to run it, Tony Stewart was not going to run that. There have been rumors, indications that he potentially was going to drive that in 2021, but he basically declined that in 2021. And now in 2022, when fans are going to be able to basically be back pretty much in full capacity, depending what happens with COVID-19, he will most likely now run that one-off race. Now, if Tony Stewart is to do that, what are my expectations for Tony Stewart? I think Tony Stewart will actually have a really, really decent run in that race. I think he could be a very, very surprising contender. We've seen how good he's been in the SRX, and we've seen how good he's been on dirt even in his 50s, but that is things that's different than NASCAR, and he hasn't raced in NASCAR since 2016. The last time he raced was in 2016 in the Cup Series, when he basically ran for the championship and is able to make it to the playoffs after winning at Sonoma, though he did get eliminated in the first round. But I think having Tony Stewart potentially come back to NASCAR, I think, is really, really good. If he's able to run the Xfinity Series race, he'll probably have to qualify, but I would also assume that potentially he may also reveal, I'm just going to say this, potentially a second SHR car where we may see multiple drivers run. Marco Andretti, I think, could also have the potential to run that car, and maybe even Haley Deegan will get that opportunity to race in that car as well. But I think that this SHR announcement is going to be really, really big. For those who, like I said, wondering about the Dodge announcement, I think that's going to be coming very, very soon. But I know what this pretty much is about, and I'm really excited to see what happens in regards to that. But this Stewart-Haas Racing will have a big announcement coming soon, and there will be more details and to share about that very, very soon. And now we're going to go ahead and jump into the first of two major stories of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Landon Cassill. Now, Landon Cassill, he talked about he has major backing from Voyager, and he has a potential ride where he could end up going to for 2022. It was reported this past week by Adam Stern that a Kaulig Xfinity Series car is seen as a likely destination for Landon Cassill in Voyager next season per sources, but the team says it has nothing to announce yet. Voyager may also evaluate other prospective deals in the NASCAR space, per company CEO Stephen Ehrlich. Now, Kaulig Racing, they have a big announcement that is going to be dropping on Thursday, December 9th. It's unclear what time that announcement is going to drop, but they have an announcement that's going to be coming in the next couple days, and it is believed that Landon Cassill is most likely going to go to Kaulig Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2022 in that third car. We already know that Daniel Hemrick and AJ Allmendinger will be driving full-time in 2 of their 3 cars next year, and there have been talk maybe they were going to disband down to 2 cars, but with Voyager coming in with Landon Cassill, that it looks like it's going to be the case where Landon Cassill is going to get in. I want to say this about Landon Cassill. Landon Cassill, I think, is in a journeyman driver who absolutely deserves another opportunity at a race-winning car. I think he's been very underrated. I know that this year JD Motorsports really was not that good, but you have to remember that JD Motorsports is not overall a really, really strong and a really, really great organization. And they're a team, I think, that really took a major step backward this year in performance. I think a lot of it, of course, was the fact that they had 4 Xfinity Series cars, and they probably should not have overall had 4 Xfinity Series cars in the pipeline. I think they should have, in my opinion, stayed a 2 or 3 car organization, but they also had a lot of talent trying to be in here. Jeff Erner, of course, Ryan Vargas, Colby Howard, among other drivers they had their organization last year. They wanted to keep 4 cars in their organization, including Landon, but I think Landon Cassill deserves another race-winning opportunity. The last time he raced in a race-winning car was, I believe, in 2011 when he drove for Junior Motorsports in select starts in the 2011 season, including pushing Tony Stewart. I think it was pushing Tony Stewart to a victory in that event and getting Tony Stewart, I think, his 4th or 5th straight win in 2011 in that race. But like I said, Landon Cassill, driver that's been a journeyman driver for a very, very long time. And if he gets in this ride, I think he will be a race-winning contender. I absolutely think he will. Especially, I think, how he's performed at points in not the best equipment overall. I think he will impress a lot of people next year and show that even at the age of 32, it will be 33 in 2022, but at the middle of his 30s age, I think he'll do very well. And not to mention, if this ends up being true and he ends up going there, you're going to have a really insanely stellar lineup for Kaulig Racing going into next year. You're going to have Daniel Hemrick, who won the NASCAR Xfinity Series Championship in 2021 after bumping running Austin Cindric for the win, getting to the back of him, and then getting to the inside and basically bumping him for the victory, and then winning his first career race, and we got to see his backflip. I think he'll win multiple races next year. And AJ Allmendinger, who brings a lot of energy overall over to the team, and a driver that I think is very, very basic, a driver who's had a renaissance in his career, and a driver that has really, in my opinion, gotten better as a driver in NASCAR and got his first Cup Series win in nearly 7 years at Indianapolis Road Course, and has helped Kaulig Racing become a really, really excellent and a very, very strong team. And if you put Landon Cassill in there, you're going to have 3 veterans in there, and I think a team that is going to be very fun to watch next year. The energy and charisma all 3 of these drivers have, I think they'll work together extremely well, and like I said, if Landon Cassill ends up there, I'm going to be very, very excited. And from the reaction it's seen from most people, I think that you're going to see, most people will be happy. 9 out of 10 people that I've seen on social media that have reacted to this news have been really, really happy for Landon Cassill. And like I said, I really hope and pray that Landon Cassill does end up in the Kaulig Xfinity Series car next year. I think he'll do very, very well, and I think he'll be a solid driver to end up getting into this ride next year. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. But he is the current favorite to get into a Kaulig Xfinity Series car in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Spire Motorsports and Ware Racing. Now, Corey LaJoie the other day was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. I reported on this, by the way, but it was reported by me and multiple people that Spire Motorsports is likely, and Corey LaJoie was on SiriusXM talking about this, he says that they are expected to have 2 charters in 2022. They will have 2 charters, and I said that most likely that charter is going to come from Rick Ware Racing. Now, Spire Motorsports, like I said, is expected to see a 2-car operation. There have been talks that maybe they were going to remain a 1-car operation in 2022, but now we basically have people saying that they're most likely to remain a 2-car operation. They actually were originally the acquirers of the Starcom charter for 2021, but they had a partnership with 2311 Racing. Were able to get that charter from Starcom, and they made a deal with Spire that they are able to get the charter. But I think that this move makes a lot of sense. Putting up the second Rick Ware Racing charter. Rick Ware has already sold one of their charters, and that's going to GMS Petty Racing going into next year, which they got the 51 charter back, which was the Petty Ware charter. I assume that 53 charter is probably the charter that they're going to acquire, and they will use that for the 77 car going into next season. And the 52 and the 15 charters are probably going to be them. They're probably going to use the 51 and the 15 going next year for Rick Ware Racing. But I think Spire Motorsports team that has shown a lot of promise and a lot of potential long-term down the road. And I think that they are a team that I think extremely going into next year is going to be a much better team going into next year. But if I'm Spire Motorsports, when it comes to the driver market, who you have left for your second car, you have a lot of drivers that are going to be potentially able to be eligible next year. Of course, you have the drivers also could go to their Spire truck. First guy, of course, is Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece is a driver that I think has been very, very exceptionally talented. I think, unfortunately, his time at JT Doherty really did not go great, but let's be for real. It was an uncharted car, and uncharted cars do not get as much focus on them as charter cars do. So he's probably, I think if you put him in a Spire car, a team that I think will improve next year, I think he'll do much better and impress a lot of people. And I've been saying that he probably should be the driver that they were going to go ahead and choose. He would be my first choice, in my opinion, for a driver to potentially get in this ride. I think he has a lot of talent. Now, the biggest issue for him is going to be funding. Though Spire Motorsports has a lot of funding, especially since they basically run a lot of holdings and stuff, and they have an entertainment group and stuff, and a lot of drivers they focus on, including Landon Cassill. I think he'd be a really, really good choice for that second car. Another driver I think would be really, really excellent choice is Matt DiBenedetto. Matt DiBenedetto, I know a lot of people are not big fans of, but I'm going to say he's excellent, but Matt DiBenedetto, I know a lot of people really wonder what is going on with him. I think that Matty D would be a driver that I think would do okay in this ride. I know his time with Wood Brothers really was not exceptional and really not impressive. I mean, he took a downstep performance in 2022, and he still had practice qualifying back this year, and he really didn't do great. In his first year of Wood Brothers, he actually did okay, but in his second year of Wood Brothers, he really wasn't impressive. Then he had a situation on social media and stuff, but I think Spire Motorsports would actually do okay with Matty D in this car. But the one thing, same situation for Ryan Preece. One thing that Matty D is going to have an issue with is getting funding. Though, like I said, I think Spire would have the funding to get that car for next year, for them to have potential funding going into next year. The third driver I think that potentially could go to that ride is Ryan Newman. Though I think Ryan Newman is one of the least likely drivers to end up in that ride. I think Ryan Newman is a driver that I think would be good to put into an organization. I don't think to see Ryan Newman retire on that own footsteps, but I really don't think that Ryan Newman I don't know what's going to happen with Ryan Newman. I think Ryan Newman could be potentially a third candidate for that ride, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't think Ryan Newman is going to get chosen for that ride. Another driver potentially is Anthony Alfredo, but I think Anthony Alfredo would make a lot of sense for him to either drive maybe back in the Truck Series or go back down to the Xfinity Series. Like I said, I like Anthony Alfredo, but I think another year in Xfinity would do him a lot of justice, and I think he would do very, very well. You've got other drivers they potentially could go with, guys on the free agent market, maybe from Xfinity. Maybe Jeb Byrne gets an opportunity to go in his Cup car, perhaps. Maybe other drivers in Xfinity that haven't found rides for next year could potentially get in there, but we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that. But that is the situation with that. If I had to choose my driver, though, I would 100% pick Ryan Preece for the Cup Series ride, and I actually put Matt DiBenedetto in the Truck Series ride. I want to see what Matty D can do in a Truck Series. I think Matty D would actually do pretty decent. He's a driver who has a lot of Cup Series experience, and I think that is what they should do going into next year. But regardless, we're expecting to see that second Rick Ware charter go into there, and that will be the final charter that is revealed. And then the charter market will be officially finalized for the 2022 NASCAR Cup Series season. We hope to have that out really, really soon, and we got about 60 days until the season starts. And it's been a crazy, silly season, no doubt. And I think at least for the Cup side of things, we're starting to see the final pieces and the puzzle pieces come in. Once the second Spire charter officially comes through, most likely everything for next year will be officially finalized and done. So, anyway, that's your today's NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notification on so you be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow my Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my page as well. Let's go jump over that and comment your thoughts on today's video. What do you think potentially about Spire Motorsports taking the second Ware Racing charter for 2022? Do you think it's a great decision by them or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other stories we discussed here today on the channel? Let me know in the comments below. I've got a very, very special video that's going to be dropping on the channel tomorrow morning. I hope you guys enjoy that because I've got that video coming out here very, very soon. You'll see that, and I think you're going to like what I've got coming out tomorrow. But anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great and awesome NASCAR content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.